I didn't think it would be a big deal. You know how it is when you're young and bored. Me and Sarah loved to go out exploring. We'd find abandoned places no one else would dare to go. It was thrilling at first, but I guess I never expected it to get as bad as it did that night. We'd been hearing rumors about this mall for months. It was this huge abandoned building on the edge of town. People said it was haunted or whatever, but I figured it was just talk. I didn't care. The place looked like it had been empty for years, and it was perfect for an adventure. So, one evening, we decided to check it out. I grabbed my camera, and we headed out after sunset, knowing that the place had been closed for ages. Sarah was super excited, as usual. She loved this kind of stuff, going to places that were off limits, taking pictures, trying to find something creepy. Me, I was just tagging along, thinking it would be fun. The mall looked just like I imagined. Huge, empty, and completely falling apart. Broken windows, cracked floors, graffiti everywhere. It was the kind of place you see in horror movies. The lights didn't work, so we had to use our flashlights to see anything. The air smelled musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. We wandered around the food court, the old department stores, the escalators that didn't move anymore. At first, it was just fun. We joked around, taking pictures of the old empty store signs. But then we found the back rooms. We weren't even planning to go there. We just followed the hallway, curiosity getting the better of us. The rooms in the back were where the maintenance stuff was kept. Old storage spaces, broken furniture, random boxes stacked in the corners. But something about it felt different, like the vibe shifted. I can't explain it, but it was like the air changed when we stepped in. "You want to check out the basement?" Sarah asked, her eyes lighting up like she'd just gotten a great idea. I hesitated. "A basement? Seriously? Come on. We're already here," she said, laughing. "What's the worst that could happen?" I figured we might as well. I knew there was a basement in the mall, some old, rusted service stairs in the back. So we headed down. The stairs creaked under our feet, and the smell of damp concrete hit us immediately. It was colder in the basement, darker. Our flashlights barely made a dent in the shadows, the kind of shadows that made you feel like you weren't alone. We kept walking, shining our lights on the old maintenance rooms, random pipes, and storage areas. There was nothing special down there at first, just a lot of abandoned junk. But then, we came across something that made my stomach drop. In the far corner of the basement, there was a door. Not a big one, but it was locked with a heavy padlock. Above the door, there was a faded sign that read, "Employees Only." Normally, I would have just laughed it off and kept walking, but something about this door seemed out of place. It wasn't just another part of the building, it felt like it was hiding something. "You want to open it?" Sarah asked, her voice low, almost teasing. I shook my head. "I don't know, Sarah. Something about this doesn't feel right." But she was already messing with the lock, like she wasn't taking it seriously. After a few minutes, she managed to break it open. The door creaked loudly as it swung open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel leading into the depths of the mall. The air smelled worse down there, like decay. But what caught my attention wasn't the smell. It was the faint sound coming from inside the tunnel, scraping, low and distant, like something was moving. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my pulse picking up. It was faint, but it was there. Sarah didn't answer. She was already stepping inside. "Sarah, wait." I started, but she was gone. Against my better judgment, I followed her into the tunnel. At first, it was like any other underground path I'd seen in old buildings, narrow, lined with pipes and wires, and barely enough room to walk comfortably. But the deeper we went, the stranger things started to feel. The air grew colder, thicker. The silence felt wrong, too. It wasn't the usual quiet you'd expect in a place like this. It was an eerie kind of quiet, like the world outside had disappeared. We kept going, our footsteps echoing as we moved further into the tunnel. Every now and then, I could hear a faint sound behind us. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. It was like we were being followed. But by what? I thought maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I looked at Sarah, who was a few steps ahead of me. "You're sure this is safe?" She looked back at me and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, it's just an old service tunnel. Nothing to worry about." But then, just as we were about to round a corner, The scraping noise came again, this time louder, closer. I stopped dead in my tracks. "What the hell is that?" I said, my voice shaky. Sarah turned to me, her face pale. "It's coming from behind us." Before I could react, the sound came again, louder now. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It wasn't just the pipes. It wasn't just the building settling. This was something else. Something was moving in the shadows behind us. I turned around, flashlights shaking in our hands, but there was nothing there. Nothing but darkness. We stood frozen for a second, staring into the black void of the tunnel. Then I saw it, a shadow darting past just out of the corner of my eye. My heart leapt in my chest. "We need to get out of here." But as I turned to run, I heard something I'll never forget. A whisper, low, muffled, like someone was right behind me. But when I turned, there was no one there. "Run!" I yelled. We both turned and bolted, our shoes slapping against the floor as we scrambled toward the entrance. We could hear it behind us now, the scraping faster, coming closer. We reached the door, the one we had come through, but it wouldn't open. We were trapped. I pounded on the door, my fists bruising against the metal. "No, no," I screamed. "Come on." Then I heard it again, the scraping, closer, too close. We were being followed. The door finally gave way, and we stumbled out of the tunnel, gasping for air. As soon as we were back in the basement, the noise stopped. The air went still, but I could still feel it, that presence, like we had just narrowly escaped something that didn't want us to leave. We didn't say much on the way out of the mall. We just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. As soon as we stepped outside, I felt the tension release. But when I turned around to look at the mall one last time, I swear I saw something. Someone watching us from the second floor, just beyond the cracked window. But when I blinked, it was gone. I don't know what we stumbled across that night, but it wasn't just an abandoned mall. It was something darker, something that had been hidden for a reason. We were being watched, stalked, maybe by something that wasn't human. And whatever it was, it didn't want us to leave. If you ever decide to go exploring, be careful. Some places weren't meant to be found, and some things don't stay hidden forever. I had been driving for hours, and I was exhausted. The road stretched on in front of me, an endless black ribbon cutting through a sea of empty countryside. I wasn't in a hurry, but I wasn't exactly comfortable either. The kind of restless, road-weary feeling you get when you're on the move too long. I hadn't planned to stay in this small town. I just needed somewhere to rest for the night. A cheap motel, a bed, maybe a snack, and then I'd be back on the road in the morning. Nothing fancy, just a stopover. It wasn't until I saw the sign that I made the decision. It was an old, fading neon light, flickering as if it wasn't quite sure if it wanted to stay lit. "Welcome in," the kind of sign that probably hadn't been replaced in decades. It was the only hotel in town, and honestly, I didn't care how run down it looked. The car I was driving was falling apart as it was, so I didn't need to be picky. I turned down the street and pulled into the parking lot, glancing at the small, one-story building. The outside had that dusty, neglected feel, and the flickering lights inside did nothing to make it look inviting. But I was too tired to worry about that. I just wanted to sleep. The lobby was dimly lit, and the air smelled of stale coffee and dust. The receptionist was an older woman, probably in her mid-50s, with graying hair and glasses perched low on her nose. She smiled as I walked in, but it was a little too forced, a little too wide. Not unfriendly, just odd. "Good evening," she said in a soft voice. "How can I help you?" "Just need a room for the night," I said, pulling out my wallet. "Room 312 is available. It's a little quieter on the third floor, if that suits you," she replied, handing me a key. I didn't think much of it. I took the key, thanked her, and walked out of the lobby. The air outside had cooled, and the night was growing darker. The quiet of the town pressed in around me as I walked up the stairs to the third floor. The hallway was long, dark, and the walls had that peeling yellow paint that only old buildings seem to have. The flickering overhead lights only made it worse. Room 312. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small but clean. The bed was unmade, the carpet was worn, and the air felt stale. There was a small, dim lamp by the bed that barely lit up the room, casting everything in a dull yellow glow. It was quiet, too quiet. I set my bags down, stretched my arms, and then went to the bathroom to wash my face. It was nothing special. The same kind of generic bathroom you'd find in any low-budget motel. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was just the exhaustion, or the long drive. I went to the bed, threw myself down, and turned on the TV. It was the usual nonsense channels I didn't care about, flickering in and out. I tried to relax, but the quiet of the room felt wrong. The air felt heavier somehow. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like I was being watched. It started when the clock struck midnight. I don't know why I looked up, but I did. It was as if something had snapped me out of my daze. I felt a chill that I hadn't noticed before, creeping up my spine. It was as if the air in the room had shifted. It wasn't just the temperature, it was something else. The quiet. The absolute, suffocating quiet. I could hear a faint noise. It was subtle at first, barely there, like the sound of something scraping across the floor. I turned off the TV, straining to hear. Scrape. I got up, not sure what I was doing. The room felt smaller now, more oppressive. The scraping was coming from somewhere in the walls. It was so faint. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't my imagination. Scrape, scrape. I went to the window and looked out, but all I saw was the empty parking lot below, the occasional car passing by. There was nothing. I turned back to the room, but the scraping continued. It was getting louder now. Scrape, scrape. It was coming from inside the walls. The walls were thin, the kind of walls you'd expect in a building that hadn't been updated in years. I thought maybe it was rats, old pipes, anything but what I was imagining. I decided to go down to the front desk, hoping to get some answers. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist was still there, sitting in a chair, staring at the floor. She looked up when she saw me. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked, with that same too wide smile. I asked her if she had any idea what the sound might be. I didn't mention the scraping noise directly, but she seemed to know exactly what I meant. "Oh, dear," she said softly, her eyes flicking nervously. "It's just the building. It's old. You'll get used to it." I didn't push it further. She was right about one thing: the building was old. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling me everything. I could see it in her eyes. She quickly changed the subject. "You're in room 312, right? There's been some issues with that room." I stared at her, confused. "Issues?" She gave a short nod and lowered her voice. "It's nothing, really. Just guests have had some odd experiences in that room. Just old building problems, I suppose." "Odd experiences?" I repeated, not sure what she meant. She forced another smile. "Nothing to worry about. Enjoy your stay." I went back to my room, feeling a little uneasy, but trying to convince myself it was just an old hotel doing its thing. But the scraping started again, louder this time, and I could swear it wasn't just the walls anymore. It was coming from behind the bed, the floorboards. I moved the bed, and there it was, a small crack in the floor, just enough to make me hesitate. I knelt down, my heart racing as I peered into the crack. It was pitch black down there. But then, I saw something. A note. It was folded up inside the crack in the floor. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. The handwriting was sharp, frantic, almost as if someone had written it in a hurry. "Leave before it's too late." My blood ran cold. I went straight to the door, ready to leave, but the hallway was empty. I checked the lock. It was bolted shut. There was no way out. The air in the room felt thick, like I couldn't breathe properly. And then I heard the footsteps. Clack, clack, clack. Heavy footsteps, echoing in the hallway. They were getting closer, louder, and I realized with horror that they weren't just coming from the hallway, they were coming from the room. I turned around, but there was no one there. I ran back to the front desk, only to find the lobby completely empty. The receptionist was gone. I grabbed my stuff, ready to leave, but when I stepped outside, I realized something even worse. The hotel was gone. The building had completely disappeared. In its place was just a vacant lot, an empty space where the hotel used to stand. I stumbled back, my mind racing to make sense of it. The hotel had been real, hadn't it? I could still feel the weight of the room, the scraping noise, the note in my hands, but it was gone, like it had never been there at all. I never thought I'd end up in prison. Growing up, I always thought I was a little smarter than everyone else. I didn't hang out with the wrong crowd. I didn't get into trouble like my friends. But you know how it goes, one bad decision, one mistake, and it's like a snowball rolling down a hill, fast and uncontrollable. Before I knew it, I was facing a long sentence. I'll admit it, I wasn't the best person, but I wasn't the worst either. I wasn't in there for anything too terrible, just enough to get me stuck in a mess I couldn't get out of. I tried to keep my head down, stay out of trouble, but prison's different. No one tells you how fast it changes you, how quickly you lose yourself. When you're locked up, all you've got is your own mind. And that's where the real battle is. You start thinking about things, your life, your choices, and eventually you start questioning everything. That first night in my cell, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong there. It was a single cell, so there wasn't much space. It wasn't the worst setup. No shared space, no immediate threats, just me and the four walls. But the thing about a single cell is, you're alone with your thoughts. You can't escape them, and those thoughts, they start to twist on you. The place itself felt wrong. There was something in the air, something heavy, like the walls themselves had a memory, a dark one. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the sound of doors slamming shut, the distant voices echoing through the halls. It felt like the prison itself was alive, groaning and shifting around me. But then, at some point in the night, the noises stopped. It was as if everything had gone silent, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It was suffocating, and that's when I heard it. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was soft at first, barely a whisper, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just the building settling. Maybe it was rats in the walls. But the more I listened, the more persistent it became. It was coming from the corner of my cell, farthest from my bed. I lay there, heart pounding, staring into the darkness. It wasn't the sound of a rodent or a creaky floorboard. No, this was deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I convinced myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. But I was wrong. It didn't stop. It was there every night after that. Right when I was about to drift off, it was subtle at first, almost like the walls were talking to me, scratching at the air. And each time I thought I could ignore it, it got louder. My nerves started to fray. That sound, it was never just a sound. It was like it was calling me. I didn't want to seem weak, so I never told anyone. But I wasn't the only one hearing it. That's when I started talking to the other guys. I overheard bits of conversations, little things here and there. At first, it sounded like jokes, prison nonsense. But then I heard a guy named Steve, a lifer who'd been there for a decade, talk about it. "You're in that cell?" he said, barely looking up from his bowl of mush. "Yeah, you're hearing it too, right?" I froze. He knew. "The scraping?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Yeah," Steve said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "It's been happening for years. Weird noises, bad vibes. It's part of the place. That cell's, well, it's got a history. You shouldn't be there." I thought he was just messing with me, trying to get under my skin. But when he mentioned the cell's history, something about it felt off. I pressed him, asked him what he meant. He just looked at me with these tired, almost sad eyes. "It's built on land that's been around a lot longer than the prison. People don't know about it, or they don't talk about it. But you get enough guys who've been around for years. They start mentioning stuff. You hear about the bodies, the disappearances." "Disappearances?" I repeated, not fully understanding. Steve didn't elaborate much more. He just gave me a long look, like he was weighing whether to tell me more. But he didn't. He changed the subject, like he wasn't even supposed to say anything. And that was when I started feeling like there was more to this place than anyone was willing to admit. I could feel it in my bones, a heaviness in the air that didn't sit right. The days dragged on, and that scraping sound kept haunting me. At night, it would start slowly, like someone was testing to see if I was awake. Scrape, scrape, scrape. And then it would grow louder, more insistent. I tried talking to the guards about it, but they just brushed me off. They'd laugh and tell me I was paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in that cell with me. That was when I started doing some digging on my own. I started asking questions, talking to the older inmates. They knew things that shouldn't be common knowledge. They told me about the early days of the prison, when it was still new. They said it wasn't always just a penitentiary. Before that, it was a place for people who had been forgotten, people who disappeared without a trace. I heard stories about bodies that were never recovered, prisoners who escaped without ever leaving. But what really got to me was the story of the man who had been in my cell before me. They said he hung himself, that he killed himself because he couldn't handle the pressure. But the thing was, no one ever found his body. There were rumors that he didn't die, that he was still there, in the walls, scratching, trying to get out. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was just another prison ghost story. But after hearing it from more than one inmate, I started to wonder, was there something to these stories? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to find out what was in that cell with me. I had to know if it was just my mind, or if something else was really going on. I climbed into the corner, where the scraping always started. It was cold there, so cold that I could see my breath. The air was thick. I put my ear to the wall, listening, and I felt it. Something was watching me. Something was waiting. And then, I saw it. A crack in the wall. It was small at first, barely noticeable. But as I stared at it, it grew, slowly, like something was pushing through from the other side. My heart raced as I stepped back, watching the crack expand, the sound of scraping growing louder, like nails dragging against the surface. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight, like something was holding me back. And then, it appeared. A figure half-formed, crawling out from the crack in the wall. His face was hollow, like a mask, with black eyes that stared through me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body was frozen. He crawled out further, dragging himself across the floor, a low, guttural sound escaping his lips. I could feel the cold spreading through the room as he drew closer, closer, closer. The next thing I remember is waking up in the infirmary. They told me I had collapsed from exhaustion. The guards said I must have been hallucinating, but I know what happened. I know what I saw. They moved me to a different cell, far away from the one I was in. I was one of the lucky ones, they said, but I know the truth. The cell I was in, it wasn't just a place for punishment. It was a place for something else, something alive, waiting to be set free. The thing that scares me the most, I'm not the only one who's heard it. I'm not the only one who's seen it. There are others who felt the presence, who heard the scraping, but no one talks about it. Because some things aren't meant to be known. And if you ever end up in that cell, you'll hear it too. And you'll know that there are things in this world that shouldn't exist, things that should have been buried long ago. Thanks for sticking around and listening to tonight's story. I know it wasn't easy, but I hope it left you thinking about the things we often try to ignore. If you want more stories that keep you up at night, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything, and it helps me keep sharing these tales with you. Remember, there's always more lurking in the dark. You just have to listen carefully enough to hear it. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.